Greetings and welcome to whatever this is going to turn into. Perhaps I call that gear and stuff, maybe. I don't know, we'll find a good name later. For the first video of what I hope will be a much longer series, I wanted it to be about something that is odd and out of the ordinary. I own a sizable collection of musical implements, and a few of those items would fit these criteria. However, one stands out not so much for its functionality, but rather for the unorthodox shape it has. And that is the Afterlife from VVCO Pedals that packs 4 different gain circuits in one single pedal. Some might say it has even enough distortion to raise the dead. Yeah, that sounded a lot better in my head. Anyways, before we explore this thing, we have to take some time to talk about the company who made it, VVCO Pedals. VVCO, or Vinyl Ventures Pedal Company, is, or was, more on that later, a pedal manufacturer started in 2019 by Mr. Steve Shepard and Nick Lozano in Joshua Tree, Southern California. Their self-proclaimed style of non-traditional is very accurate. I first read about them in early 2020 in an article on the Pedal of the Day website about the DeLorean, their delay pedal that's in a DeLorean toy car / collectible enclosure, and since then I've always been fascinated by the designs they came up with. The circuits themselves are usually their take on classic pedals with a few original designs here and there, but their choice of enclosures was what set them apart from other boutique pedal manufacturers. Customizing an off-the-shelf toy to use as a pedal enclosure at the scale they were doing it is not something I've seen before or since. Sure, there were the few one-offs from lone builders, but it's not quite the same. Retrofitting circuit boards, control, and jacks into those nice die-cast metal toy cars gave us some incredible designs like the DeLorean pedal that I mentioned earlier, the Dark Knight distortion that's in the Batmobile, and the Mystery Machine chorus, it's in the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine van, just to name a few. They did not limit themselves to cars, they used other collectibles as well. T800 distortion, for example, has everything it needs installed in the skull of a genuine T800 cybernetic organism straight from Cyberdyne. Oh, wait, it was just one of those collectible T800 heads. Damn it! While they use more conventional enclosures for the Dogfather Preamp, the Timebox stopwatch utility pedal, and the Pickle Fuzz, they also did a lot of custom work like transforming an original NES controller into a clean boost. However, the Afterlife and its sister pedal, the Afterlight, which is just a smaller version with one fuzz and one distortion circuit, standing out for being, according to my research, the only pedals they manufactured with an entirely custom designed enclosure made from machined aluminum, and that's pretty cool. Unfortunately, on February 8, 2025, it was announced on VVCO's Facebook page that Steve, the builder behind these crazy designs, had suddenly passed. The announcement also mentioned that his passing made VVCO's future uncertain, and the company may not recover from that loss. In the weeks following Steve's passing, VVCO sold all the remaining inventory, including the prototype and spare parts, at really affordable prices. So at some point, you could purchase a pedal for $50 US plus the cost of shipping. From what I can find online, everything has been liquidated in a matter of months, and all the proceeds from the sales went directly to the Shepard family to hopefully help them through these difficult moments. Today, the future of the company is still unclear. Their website went down around August 2025, but their Facebook and Reverb pages are still up at the time of recording this video in August of 2026. Last update made to their Facebook dates from November 26, 2025, and the Reverb page only lists a single Dogfather preamp for about $1,000 Canadian, not including taxes and shipping. Reverb page of Mr. Shepard, Scissor Studio, still online, and you can see some of his custom work that he did over the years. There will be links in the description to the page I just mentioned. Alright, let's take a look at the pedal now. I purchased this one on September 17, 2023 during a flash sale for about 165 Canadian dollars. So with shipping, taxes, and duties, total cost of ownership was closer to $240 Canadian, give or take a few dollars. First thing you notice about it is its enclosure. Before we get any further, we need to clear something up. This is a coffin. It is not a casket. A casket is rectangular with straight sides, like this. Coffin is hexagonal and designed to match the profile of the human body, like this. Wider at the shoulder, tapering up towards the head, and down towards the feet. Enclosure is 100% machined aircraft grade aluminum. It's not a die cast like typical Hammond or Eddystone boxes. It has a nice anodized color for durability. Two colors were available for purchase, black space and gray night. This one is in black space. Quality of the machining is top notch. There's no burrs, no sharp edges, no machining marks, no sanding marks, no nothing. And they even drilled some slits on the side, behind which some carefully placed red LEDs are shining when the effect is on. The artwork and labels are laser engraved and very easy to read. Enclosure is much larger than the typical pedal at about 19 centimeters long by 9 centimeters wide, or 7.5 inch long by 3.5 inch wide for our metric impaired friends, compared to a big muff. Takes quite a bit of space on the pedal board. In terms of weight, there's some heft to it. It's about 2 pounds. It's not light, and as you would expect, the bulk of the weight is in the enclosure. On the outside, there are 3 controls exposed, on-off stop switch, a volume knob on top, and a rotary selector to switch between the different distortion and fuzzes. Originally, the Afterlife comes equipped with a color changing LED that looks really cool. However, these LEDs tend to inject noise in the circuit, and my pedal did suffer from a very audible whining whenever the color would change. Contacted VVCO support and they sent me a replacement color changing LED, as well as some assorted color LED just in case the replacement would have the same issue. It did, so I settled on this nice white LED instead. I swear it's white. The rotary selector allows you to select between 2 different distortions and 2 different fuzzes. A vintage distortion inspired by everyone's first distortion pedal, the venerable Boss DS1, and a modern distortion inspired by the Proco Rat. A vintage fuzz inspired by the Maestro FZ1, that's a ratio, I'm not that rich. And a modern fuzz, which is VVCO's own pickle fuzz, that was based on the damn meathead fuzz, which was itself a modified high-gain silicon fuzz face circuit that's in a one-knob design, so you only had a volume knob. About the circuit they chose. Both the Boss DS1 and the Proco Rat distortions came out in 1978. While the DS1 used transistors and the Rat used an op-amp, they're both very much designs of their time, so I'm not quite sure why the DS1 is labeled as vintage and the Rat is labeled as modern. I'll say it's a transistor versus op-amp thing, but really, I don't know, and we might never know the answer to that. For the fuzzes, however, it depends on which variant of the FZ1 they base their design on. Since it isn't specified, I just assume it's the 1962 FZ1 and not the modified FZ1A from '65 that Gibson released when everybody wanted one after listening to the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Considering the Dallas Arbiter fuzz face was released in 1966, that's a difference of only 4 years between it and the FZ1. Granted, the pickle fuzz is based on the modified fuzz face design for 2004, it's still a fuzz face. So I'll go on the limb and say it's the difference in topology between the FZ1 and the fuzz face that's the deciding factor on which is which, with the fuzz face topology being more recent and becoming the homework everyone else in the industry copied or modified in some way to try to capitalize on the fuzz craze of the 1960s. Internally, there's not much, but you'll find mini trem pots to adjust the gain, level, bias, or filter of the effects. Not every effect has the same internal control. We'll open it up and look inside later. Other than that, it is a true bypass pedal, and it runs on your typical 9-volt center negative power rail with a standard bus style 2.1mm DC jack. It does require at least 100 milliamp of current to work, since the 4 circuits are active all at once, and only their output is switched with the rotary selector. Alright, enough talking. Now it's time to listen to it. Unlike a certain strings manufacturing company, I don't use AI for my demos. I am perfectly able to make noise all by myself, thank you very much. With that being said, I will be using my Dingwall NG3 5-string for this demo. First, we'll play directly into the Afterlife, going straight to the audio interface. What you'll hear is the raw sound of the bass and the pedal. No compression, no EQ, no clean blended back in, no nothing. Next, I'll run the Afterlife through my Mesa Subway Plus Bass DI Preamp 2. That's a name that rolls right off the tongue. Give a little bit of color. And we may even run it through the pedal board and see how it stacks. Alright, it is a different day and the different shirt, and I am re-recording the demos because I was not happy with the end result of the first few runs, or I had some weird technical glitches either with the camera or with the recording setup that was not recording exactly what I was playing, or it was just not recording at all. Either way, we're going to keep that very short and sweet. So one riff first, clean, then through the Afterlife, going through all the 4 different fuzzes and distortion. Then we'll add in the bass preamp, and then we will move to the pedal board. So the bass is set in Music Man mode with bridge middle, with a slight boost in bass, slight boost in low mid, and slight cut in high mid, and it sounds something like this. Alright, now let's go with the Afterlife on, first with the vintage distortion. Volume is at the minimum because I don't want to blow out my speakers. That sounds about right. Now we switch to the modern distortion, lower the volume a bit. That one has slightly less volume, I'll probably have to fix that in post. Alright, and now the modern fuzz. Slightly less volume again. vintage fuzz. It's sustain though. Alright, now let's mess around with the wiring and connect the subway bass preamp. So we are back with the subway plus bass DI preamp 2 connected. Afterlife is off, so our tone is now sounding a little like this with the following settings. Right, now we'll go through the same thing. So the vintage distortion first. About here, that sounds good. Now the modern distortion. Next, the modern fuzz. No, before you ask, I will not be editing out the mistakes. That way you can't say that it was AI. All right. Now we are ready to move over to the pedal board. And we are back, this time with a slightly different setup over at the pedal board. And the signal chain is complicated. So first goes through the debugger, then the tuner, then the POG, the envelope filter, then the Empress bass comp, the Empress bass EQ, and then a loop switcher with 3 different loops. Well, technically 2 loops. One is the clean blend that you can add back in. So loop A that's currently enabled is the Super Cool Pedal 77 fuzz blender, the GHS Morning Glory clean, and the ZVEX bass distortion that's slightly hidden under the massive hunk of metal that the Afterlife is. And loop B is the bass Big Muff Pi 2, the Dingwall 35th anniversary custom design by Dark Glass, JHS overdrive preamp, and the Guptec Big Peanut. And after that goes through the plug out FX. Yes, I do have one of those. Ibanez Mini Chorus, super cool pedal, Trini phase phaser, extra harmonics, good vibes, univibe, modulator, and a solid gold effects Oblivion quad flanger, then an Empress ecosystem, Empress reverb, then an 1176 compressor at the end of the chain, and through the rehearsal, that's only for giving a metronome and being able to play songs through Bluetooth, which is not something that I use very often because it doesn't sound very good. Anyway, so the settings on the Subway Bass DI Preamp 2 are roughly the same, volume slightly adjusted. So because of the compression and the EQ, the clean is slightly different. And now we are going to just see what happens if the Afterlife is at the end of a series of drive or a bunch of other pedals. In that case, I put it at the end of the loop A. Currently, it is running loop A and B in parallel. We can switch that, go in series and see how it stacks with an overdrive after and an overdrive before. And I really want to show mostly the two fuzzes, how they behave when you have a bunch of stuff in front, because it doesn't do great. Actually, let's start with those. So the modern fuzz actually a little bit better than what I thought. Really low volume. Slightly better. You can hear the hiss and the back, like it really struggles. So that hiss that you're hearing comes from all the other pedals in front, mostly these because they are buffered, and fuzzes, the fuzz faces mostly, or anything that has only 2 gain stages, don't really do well with pedals in front. That one is not as bad because it has 3 gain stage, so that's the vintage fuzz. It is very glitchy. It is glitchy. If we go back to the fuzz face and say I put the Morning Glory clean, it is slightly different. But if I put the bass distortion, the impedance changes a lot and matches more closely to what the fuzz face expects. there's no change with the vintage fuzz because it has 3 gain stages. So it can recover from a slight difference in impedance, whereas the fuzz face has more issues with it. Now if I feed loop A into loop B, and in loop B we're going to enable this overdrive. Now there's a bit more noise because there's more gain, obviously. We're still on the vintage fuzz. Switch to the modern fuzz. Still a lot of this. Distortions don't really have that issue. We'll go to the vintage one. Not too bad. I've seen worse. If we blend clean signal, we go on the vintage fuzz. Just if we remove the blend. There's a definite difference with the blend added back in, with the clean blended back in, I mean. Now, since we know what the vintage and the modern fuzz sounds like when we are in, well, behind a series of other gain pedals, let's see what happens if we put it first. Let's first mute that. Take that. Try not to bump. Oh god. There we go. Tripod, it's in the way. Now we are connected exactly as it should. Take that. Oh, dang it. Let's plug our trusty allocated cable in here. Dang it. There we go. Put that in here. Stay in vintage fuzz. Modern fuzz, sorry. Just to show we are on the modern fuzz. There is absolutely zero is. I am unmuted. Those sound great when they are first in line in the signal chain, because they really depend on the impedance of the instrument and not on the different impedance of any kind of pedal that's buffered, or even an unbuffered pedal like this one, which is true bypass. It can have a major impact on how the signal is going to make it through to the rest of the electronics. Now let's see what it sounds with chorus. Let's go with the modern fuzz. Sounds pretty good. And the vintage fuzz. Even the vintage fuzz sounds relatively decent on that one. It's not my favorite because it is supposed to emulate a broken mixing console, but that is beside the point. Either way, I think it sounds decent for a bass. It's obviously none of those are made to be used with basses. They are primarily guitar effect pedals, well, guitar effect circuits, but they sound pretty good on bass. The bass response is sufficient. Of course, if you blend back your clean signal on it, then you can pretty much use any drive or gain or fuzz that you want to use. So yeah, that is pretty much all that I really wanted to demo here. Could go on and try it out and stack it with a Nova Drive preamp or with another fuzz behind, but it really wouldn't serve any purpose because it's not something that you would do typically.
Are you sure about that?
And that's not really how that was designed to be used, especially not the two fuzz circuits. Now that we've played with it for a bit, I think it's time to look inside. And to do this, we need to remove these 4 screws that are number 2 Phillips. Not particularly stable. Use both hands to hold it so it doesn't move, at least not too much. Damn it. I'm in the middle of doing something. No, I don't need to look at that notification. There we go. And voila. So the back plate has the manufacture date, so September 2023, and Steve's signature. And let's see if we can zoom in. Well, that's about as best I can do with that camera. So because the components are small and my fingers aren't, I believe it's time to bring out our patented plastic pokey. So let's see, what do we have here? First of all, the control board for the rotary switch with hot glue on it. Don't like when they do that. It makes repairs a little more complicated. They did the same thing with the foot switch. They covered all the pins with hot glue. Not great. So you can see the different trim pots for the different circuits. A few transistors. One op amp for the red inspired circuit. It's a bunch of LEDs sticking out on the side that are conveniently aligned with the slots. You can see here. Another oddity on that is that, I don't know if it's going to be very visible, but the ground logs of the power input and the two jacks are tied together, which makes sense considering they're close, but it's not something you see often. Let's see, let's bring that close so we can see the markings, or at least the PCB in more details. So you have the VVCO branding with the Afterlife branding here. Layout by Scissorfight Studio. Play loud, play proud. Hard to see here, but where it is, and that's pretty much it. Oh, the LED connectors for the top mounted LED here. Quite painful to change. You have to remove everything, or at least remove the foot switch knot, the different knobs, better if it's in the camera field of view. Then you can remove this board and this board, because that is tied with all those wires that you can sort of see here. And it's not pleasant to disassemble. And also soldering between the capacitor and the trim pot is also an unpleasant thing. So another thing to note is that there is no battery anywhere in here. It's only powered through the DC jack. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. There's lots of components, but you have to remember that there is effectively four circuits inside of that pedal, and you need to find ways to make the layout make sense, which is not that easy, especially if you have like trim pots all over the place to adjust things that you can't have on the front face of the pedal. Well, that was an interesting assortment of tones, that's for sure. While not specifically designed for bass, the 4 gain circuits of the Afterlife have a decent-ish response to low end. Could have probably tweaked the internal trim pots a bit more though. Unfortunately, the fuzzes don't do well unless the pedal is at the very beginning of the signal chain, so stacking gain stages or other tone shaping pedals is a bit more complicated since this one has to be in front, and mixing the clean signal back in is really hit or miss since they don't play well with buffers either, but that's pretty typical of the fuzz topologies they chose. If they went with anything with 4 gain stages like a big muff, they wouldn't have that issue. Would I recommend it? Probably. Depends on your specific use case. For a set and forget situation, it's a good option. You have 4 gain circuits in one unit, just need to set the internal trim pots how you want them once, close it back up, and those pots will never move even if you throw your pedal around. If you like messing with your pedal settings, it may not be the one for you. Fortunately, it's pretty much unobtainium nowadays. If you find a used one for a good price, you should probably consider getting it. Even if you don't end up using it, it stands out, and it's a good conversation starter. and that's one more pedal in your collection. All right, that's it for today, and I will see you in the next video.